Parliament and support staff, radio listeners, TV viewers, those viewing via social media, and members of the media. Welcome to this Central Committee meeting number 4 of today, Wednesday, October 25th, 2023. I would like to give a special welcome to the Ombudsman of St. Martin, Ms. Gwendolyn Mossel, and her support staff. We have established a quorum of 7 factions. Please stand for a moment of silence. Thank you. I have received notice of absence from the following members: MP Rolando Bryson, MP Chanel Brownville. Are there any notifications? I see MP George. MP George, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon to the chair, my colleagues in Parliament, Honorable Ombudsman Gwendolyn Mossel and her support staff, Cecilia, Duggins, our Khifir, persons that are viewing, and those that are listening by the available medium. Mr. Chairman, I had to take the floor to make the following statement. Mr. Chairman, as we all know, we had a close call with Hurricane Tammy. Thank God she went to the north and we were spared, even though it was a Category 1. We have no idea what devastation it could have caused. Mr. Chairman, I'm a bit disappointed because there are some persons who complain that they did some purchasing and so on, and hurricane didn't come and report and so on, Mr. Chairman. Instead of thanking God that it went to the north, they're complaining. Mr. Chairman, this morning at about 1 a.m., a Category 5 hurricane struck Acapulco, Mexico. At 1 a.m., a Category 5, 165 miles an hour, struck Mexico. And we are complaining, Mr. Chairman. Chairman, let us pray for those families. We don't know how many lives have been lost, but let us be thankful that we were spared this hurricane. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP George. Next person is MP Sarah Westcott-Williams. MP Sarah, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and a very good afternoon to you, a good afternoon to my colleagues, a good afternoon and a word of welcome to the Ombudsman of St. Martin and her support staff here this afternoon. A good afternoon to all persons viewing or listening to this meeting of Parliament. Mr. Chairman, of course, it is good that we have the Ombudsman here this afternoon to give us a further elucidation on the year report of the Ombudsman's Office for 2022. And while I understand that this week, which is actually a meeting week of Parliament, but we had a tripartite, I can understand that. But if I look, Mr. Chairman, at the outstanding issues for meetings of this Parliament, and I look at the agenda for this week, I ask myself, where are we going? 1, a request for a question hour with the Minister of TIAT regarding public transportation and some of the policies as publicized in the newspapers regarding public transportation was supposed to be held this week as well. No. Does one think that the requestor will get an indication of this? No, not at all. There are meetings outstanding, public meetings, in which we had ministers here to mention the General Health Insurance meeting, and both ministers, in the case of the General Health Insurance and the public meeting on GEBE, indicated that they will be ready to answer to Parliament within 2 weeks. That was week before last. When ministers say 2 weeks, they mean we will come back in the next meeting week of Parliament. We don't see that on the agenda of this week. We received via the Minister of VSA a thunderload of questions regarding the General Health Insurance as put forward to the Minister by the unions. Apparently, from what we learn from media reports, these answers were provided. Does Parliament receive such as well, since we have received the questions? No. We hear, Mr. Chairman, of the vendors right across the road here making a presentation to Parliament about the rebuilding of the market. A matter that has been addressed over and over here in the Parliament of St. Martin. Do we get any information as to what is happening? What became of the much touted agreement for the rebuilding of the Phillipsburg Marketplace that was entered into with Royal Caribbean? What became of that? Why did the rebuilding of the marketplace now have to wait on the approval of the capital budget of government? I hope that is what is being awaited. Because recall that when the rebuilding of the marketplace of Phillipsburg was firstly put on the budget, some years ago, it was taken off of the national budget because the cruise line, Royal Caribbean, would have assisted with it. So, Mr. Chairman, I ask myself, what are priorities when the scheduling of meetings and continuation of meetings are put on the agenda of Parliament? And if from your perspective as chairperson of the Presidium, some enlightenment can be given, it would be very much appreciated. In the meantime, I look forward to at least hearing from the Ombudsman regarding the report that was presented to Parliament, even at this time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP Sarah Westcott-Williams. The next person is MP Grisha Halliger-Martin. MP Grisha Halliger-Martin, you have the floor.
A pleasant good afternoon to you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon to the Ombudsman and her support staff. Good afternoon to those listening, viewing online, and good afternoon to my fellow colleagues that are here with me today. Mr. Chairman, I would like to start off by first and foremost extending my heartfelt condolences to an ex-colleague of mine, Cassandra Webster, who suddenly, of the sudden passing of her mom, Ivy Thielman. I will keep her and her family in prayers in these tough coming days. Mr. Chairman, in addition to MP Westcott's request from you, I would like to also pose a question to you regarding the request that was made last meeting by MP Rayon Peterson regarding us also receiving the answers that was submitted by the unions, by the minister regarding the 100+ questions. If we will be receiving that as well from government, if that would be transferred to us as well before the meeting is called. And lastly, there's also a pending meeting a while now. We're looking forward to maybe having on the docket is the meeting requested by MP Melissa Gums and MP Rayon Peterson and myself regarding the Parliament, the Ad Hoc Committee of Parliament. That too is something that we would like to get an update from, especially from the government, Mr. Chairman, knowing the fact that we already signed a 3-year agreement in this building. Time waits for no man, and we haven't received any update as to what the issue is there or when they would start building the Parliament building and so on. So we both, MP Westcott and I, would like to respond to our questions. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Grisha Halliger-Martin. No more notifications. For both of you, I will get back to you as soon as possible. We have as agenda point for this meeting, Ombudsman Year Report 2022. Yes, MP Grisha Halliger-Martin.
Mr. Chairman, as soon as possible? Before this meeting is over, we will get an update from you?
I'll try for before end of the day today.
Thank you.
If not, at least during the week. I have to get the response from ministers and everyone, so it's not just me alone who can take the decision.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. We have as agenda point for this meeting, Ombudsman Year Report 2022, under document IS/981/2022-23, dated August 9, 2023. We go over to the agenda point. On August 9, 2023, Parliament received the annual report 2022 from the Ombudsman. This document is registered as incoming document IS/981/PY23-2023 and can be found on your general teams of Parliament. At this time, I would like to give the floor to the Ombudsman of St. Martin, Ms. Gwendolyn Mossel, for her opening remarks and presentation. Ms. Mossel, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Pleasant good afternoon to you, members of Parliament, the griffier, and all tuned in. Our format of presentation will be, I will give a general overview. The legal advisor, Ms. Aishira Cecilia, will provide statistics on the complaints handled, and the Secretary General, Mr. Randolph Doggins, will give an overview on the finances. After 12 years of existence, the institution of the Ombudsman has grown. Our pillars of operation are grounded in core values such as respect, integrity, ethics, and honesty. The Ombudsman is continuously looking for ways to work together with government to actively and adequately address the complaints, grievances of the public. Instead of conducting systemic investigations, for instance, into many complaints received against the Ministry of Romi and Teat regarding hinder from garages operating in a residential area, the Ombudsman resolved to arrange an interministerial meeting with the main stakeholders from all ministries involved, Teat, Romi, as well Justice. As a result, the Ministry of Romi and Teat are now working closely together when issuing permits to garages in a residential area. The Bureau always seeks to handle a complaint by way of an intervention, and these methods have proven to be successful. Today's presentation will provide a short overview of the most important issues covered in the 2022 annual report. In 2022, 2 systemic investigations were completed. The systemic investigation regarding the tendering and awarding process of the solid waste collection 2021-2026, and the systemic investigation into the reallocation of parcels of leased land in Over the Bank. The background, concerns, and resolutions of both investigations were already covered in last year's annual report. However, I would like to bring the following to your attention as it relates to actions to be taken by government and Parliament. In both systemic investigations, the government failed to provide the Ombudsman with pertinent information despite numerous requests to do so. The Ombudsman can only carry out its function with full cooperation from government. Article 19 of the National Ordinance Ombudsman confers an information right on the Ombudsman and imposes an information obligation on administrative bodies. However, there are no consequences to deter non-cooperation. As a result, the Ombudsman has started the process to amend the legislation to include coercive tools to assist in the information gathering process, specifically regarding the obligation to attend hearings and the requesting of documentation. Initial discussions were held with the President of Parliament in March 2022. The Ombudsman will continue said discussions in the coming year and looks forward to Parliament's support. With regards to the tendering and awarding process of the solid waste collection, the Ombudsman reiterates the recommendation provided to government to improve the legal framework for semi-public and public procurement by enacting legislation, including the required LBHAM, as well as establish standardized procurement guidelines, policies that require civil or social control mechanisms, for example, tender boards, to monitor the process of public contracting, as well as a script and dry book. This procedure ordinance is still not in place. The Ombudsman is asking Parliament's attention for this as it pertains to public procurement across the board. The Ombudsman still received complaints regarding other tendering processes, and therefore highlights the need for corrective measures to be taken in regards to the areas for improvement mentioned in the systemic investigation. With regards to the reallocation of parcels of leased land over the bank, after being notified by the minister that government had taken the matter to court, the Ombudsman issued a notice of termination with the following standards of propriety that should be taken into consideration: active and adequate information provision, legal certainty, legitimate expectations, adequate organization of services, reasons, and promptness. The Ombudsman has taken note of the court verdict dated the 22nd of August 2023, which is broadly in line with the summary of findings stated in the notice of termination. Although the scope of the systemic investigation was broader than that of the court, in that the Ombudsman was investigating the allocation of domain land in two instances, 2016 and 2021. The court's review was limited to what parties brought forward, and thus it concerned the allocation of domain land to 6 individuals in 2016. Both the court and the Ombudsman acknowledged the legal basis for the minister to allocate domain land, the discretionary authority, contractual freedom that exists for the minister, and that such authority is also bound by principles of good governance. In its analysis, the court, however, has set new precedent by using the Didam arrest to give content to the principles of good governance it deemed applicable in this case, namely equality and transparency principles. The Didam arrest requires government to adhere to the following. The government body must firstly draw up criteria policy on the basis which the buyer, also the acquirer, is selected. This criteria policy must be objective, verifiable, and reasonable. The public body must then ensure an appropriate degree of publicity with regard to the availability of the immovable property, the selection procedure, the timetable, and the selection criteria to be applied. The government body must publish information about these aspects in a timely manner prior to the selection procedure in such a way that potential candidates can take note of it. The Ombudsman notes that the lack of a published policy has allowed successive ministers to issue domain land to a large degree at their discretion. This is further compounded by the lack of continuity with the constant changes in ministers over the years. The establishment of a policy and a central registry for the allocation of domain land has been a consistent recommendation of the Ombudsman since the inception of the institution. The Ombudsman observes that it is rather unusual for government to initiate court proceedings against its own people regarding their own processes, which they have been following consistently for years. The question is, to what extent the average man or woman can be held accountable for the government's shortcomings, such as the lack of a public policy. The people trusted government, followed a process in accordance with standard procedures to obtain domain land, including paying to have the land measured. As the voice and protector of the rights of the people, the Ombudsman is asking Parliament, the representative of the people, to consider all aspects of this case, as well as the effects of the lack of policy, and ensure that it is addressed comprehensively. The Ombudsman is presently handling a complaint whereby complainant, after having paid all the fees, the canon, for the transfer of the leased land, The Ombudsman is presently handling a complaint whereby complainant, after having paid all the fees for the transfer of the leased land, is unable to obtain the land because the notary could not make the transfer of leased land as a result of jurisprudence dated the 26th November 2021, namely the Didam arrest. The notary informed complainant that government must comply with the above-mentioned requirements set in said arrest in order to transfer the land. The notary can be held accountable The notary can be held accountable if this is not the case. In the Didam case law, it was pointed out to the notaries that they cannot turn a blind eye when having to deal with the transfer of any type of title to an immovable property owned by a municipal or country, read Country St. Martin, and not inquire if there is a policy in place. This was also communicated to the minister and the acting head of domain affairs in May of this year. Subsequently, complainant informed the acting department head of domain affairs that she still has not received a deed for the property as the notary is waiting on the ministry to proceed. The acting department head responded by stating that he does not understand why the notary is not carrying out their tasks. In September of this year, the notary informed complainant, among others, that all notaries have ceased the signing of the deeds for issuance of long lease based on the fact that the notaries know that there is no policy in place at the Ministry of Romi. The notary further informed complainant that after having had a meeting, the civil law notaries on St. Martin agreed that in the event signing takes place of a notarial deed, that the Minister of Romi has to confirms in writing or in the notarial deed of issuance of the long lease that the requirements of the Didam arrest have been followed in said case. Mr. Chair, it is therefore imperative that government set a policy in place expeditiously in accordance with the principles of good governance as outlined in the Didam arrest. The Ombudsman is requesting Parliament's attention to look into this matter with great urgency. As guardian of the Constitution, the Ombudsman performed a constitutional analysis on de landsbesluit houdende algemene maatregelen from 2021 tot wijziging van het organisatiebesluit justitie in verband met de introductie van het in de bijlage opgenomen functieboek justitie. Some concerning observations as it relates to the process of establishing the legislation were identified by the Ombudsman. However, these did not rise to the level of a constitutional review. These concerns related inter alia to the Committee of Civil Servants, the CCSU, and its right to assent. The Minister of Justice was subsequently informed of these concerns and was provided with considerations for the future. That will be it for my part, and I hand the floor over, with your permission, Mr. Chair, to the legal advisor, Ms. Cecilia.
Okay. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, MPs. Protocol having been established, I'll cover the complaints handled. The Ombudsman continues to find ways to efficiently handle complaints and accurately reflect the work conducted by the Bureau. This has resulted in more in-depth and lengthy handling of inquiries received at the Bureau, also known as information windows. An IW can entail providing the complainant with information, referring them to the relevant institution, and/or mediating complaints. These requests are general complaints that have not led to a report. General complaints will now be added to the total amount of complaints that led to a report by the Ombudsman. Thus, in 2022, there were a total of 341 complaints handled, of which 37 resulted in a report by the Ombudsman. General complaints. The statistics show that a total of 304 general complaints were received. When broken down into different categories, the most complaints concern the topics civil cases, so persons coming with concerns regarding a labor dispute. This amounted to 27. Police, 26, followed by immigration, 25. Inquiries, complaints regarding tax assessments came up to a total of 20. Rental disputes, domain affairs also garnered much attention from the public, with each totaling 16. General complaints can range from not knowing where to go with their issue and therefore being referred to the relevant institution. It can also mean that persons come to the Ombudsman with questions, as well as when there is a communication breakdown between government and complainant, requiring some form of intervention from the Ombudsman. Moving on to reports. In 2022, a total of 37 complaints led to a report by the Ombudsman. The ministries accounted for 35 of these investigations, and the ZBOs accounted for 2. The significant decrease in the number of complaints for the ministries compared to last year can be attributed to the increase in complaints against the Ministry of Romi with regard to the OTB systemic investigation. The Ministry of Romi accumulated the most investigations in 2022 with 9, followed by the Ministry of TIAT with 8, and the Ministry of Justice with 7. From the 9 investigations into the conduct of the Ministry of Romi, 6 were for the account of Domain Affairs, 2 for the Inspectorate, and 1 for the Permits Department. Despite meetings and agreements to respond to complaints, the Ombudsman continues to observe minimum response to complainants as well as the investigations of the Ombudsman from this ministry. The Ombudsman has been reiterating her concern about this ministry's ability or inability to serve the public due to the existing structural deficiencies since the year report of 2018. It must be noted that anno 2022, these expressed concerns remain the same. Despite the appointment of a complaint liaison to deal with the backlog, the Ombudsman was forced to close most of the ministry's cases without a substantive response from the ministry. On to the Ministry of TIAT, that accumulated the second highest number of investigations with 8. 4 investigations are attributed to the Inspectorate, 3 for the Department of Economic Licenses, and 1 for the account of the Minister. The Ombudsman noted an increase in complaints concerning hindrances, namely due to smell and or noise of in particular garages. Because of these complaints and in an effort to more efficiently address the matter, the Ombudsman held 2 interministerial meetings with the relevant departments of the Ministries of Romi, Tiat, and Justice. The meetings were successful insofar as areas where the ministries could improve cooperation were identified, overlapping policies could be streamlined, and proper competencies could be established. Most complaints were able to be resolved. 1 complaint is still ongoing. The Ombudsman will continue to employ this manner of addressing matters interministerially where possible. Lastly, the Ministry of Justice accounted for 7 investigations, placing this ministry 3rd highest. 3 investigations were for the account of the Immigration and Border Protection, and 1 investigation each was attributed to the Minister, HR matter, Public Prosecutor Office, and KPSM. The Ombudsman continues to observe and remains concerned about the functioning of the Immigration Department, the application of proper standards in policies and in individual circumstances in regards to the Immigration Department, and also is concerned about the functioning of KPSM in relation to the public. However, recognition must be given to this ministry's effort to address these matters by responding to investigations of the Ombudsman, being open to critical feedback, and attempts made to address the structural issues within the Ministry of Justice. Late 2022, the Ombudsman took notice of a pilot project between the Ministries of Justice, VSA, and TIAC to grant undocumented workers the ability to obtain legal work permits. The Ombudsman requested and emphasized the need for a proper published policy to regulate the execution of this policy. While the Ombudsman received a draft from the ministry, the Ombudsman did not observe a policy ever being published. The closed cases pretty much speak for themselves. I'll move on to investigation topics. The Ombudsman issued 8 reports that concern complaints by civil servants regarding an HR matter. These investigations spanned 4 ministries, whereby 5 were for the account of the Ministry of Finance. In this regard, the Ombudsman emphasizes the need for increased awareness of rights and responsibilities among the civil service, as well, including management. The Ombudsman requests awareness and attention for the use of policy and understanding of individual circumstances to avoid disproportional decision-making. The Ombudsman also investigated concerns regarding noise pollution. The Ombudsman notes a need for clear policy and enforcement resources with room for consideration of individual circumstances and transparent objection procedures. On to violated standards. The standard of promptness is the highest violated standard and is a consequence of insufficient information provision and inadequate organization of government services, resulting in the inability to provide a response within a legal or reasonable time frame. Secondly, the ability to adequately serve the public is contingent on an efficient and capable workflow and civil service. This includes management and leadership training, hiring and providing refresher courses, and retraining of the existing civil service, capacity building. Adequate and fair application of HR procedures, and a clear workflow with division of tasks, including adaptation for absence and sick leave. The third highest violated standard is that of active and adequate information provision. The Ombudsman reiterates the need for a proactive approach to providing relevant, accurate, and adequate information to the public and parties in concrete cases. Lastly, for me, recommendations, the Ombudsman issued 80 recommendations for the year 2022. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Mossel and Ms. Cecilia. Okay. Mr. Doggins, you have the floor.
All right. Oh, okay, now it is. Good afternoon, members of Parliament, the listening public, the griffier. As the Ombudsman indicated, I will now handle shortly the financial reporting of the Ombudsman Bureau for 2022. The budget amounted, the budget of the Ombudsman for 2022 amounted to just over 1.3 million guilders. From this amount, just under 1.3 million, 1,285,000 was spent. The following slide depicts how the budget available budget versus spending of the Bureau has developed over the last 12 years. As you can see, about approximately 90% of the budget of the Ombudsman is utilized on average. This slide provides an overview of our expenses, personnel expenses versus operational. You can see about 70% of our budget is goes to personal expenses, and the balance is about 30% to operational. The personal expenses is based on our formation plan, which is the present formation plan consists of an ombudsman, a secretary general, a legal advisor, 2 investigators, and an administrator. As the Ombudsman alluded to in her presentation, not only are we busy amending the national ordinance in terms of adding coercive means to investigations, one of the additions we are introducing is a Kinder Ombudsman, which is long overdue. So that will also require some changes to the formation plan. In this slide, you can see some of the proposed changes, which we are still discussing. So changes are, of course, still possible. Finally, this is an overview of our operational expenses. As you can see, rent, utilities, and other goods and services are the Ombudsman Bureau's main expenditures in terms of operational expenses. With that, I conclude financial reporting.
Thank you, Mr. Duggins. Ms. Mossel, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In closing, I just would like to say all investigations of the Ombudsman are conducted in a fair, transparent, and impartial manner. As such, all reports are thorough, with sound reasoning based on facts and findings. And I would like to end with our credo: the Ombudsman is a critical friend, an important ally, if recognized and valued as such. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Mossel. I look to my left now, to which member of parliament can I give the floor? And I see MP Sarah Westcott Williams. MP Westcott, you have the floor.
Thank you once again, Mr. Chairman, and through you, my thanks to the Ombudsman and her staff for the presentations made. I have no questions regarding the presentation. It's clear and with all the necessary data. But what I would like to suggest to this meeting, this Central Committee meeting of Parliament, that we look very carefully at the issues that the Ombudsman has highlighted as areas for the Parliament of St. Martin to take note and act upon. So it is, in my opinion, not sufficient to thank the Ombudsman for a beautiful report and then put the report somewhere in a desk. There are several issues, important issues that have been highlighted, and too often we see with reports from high councils of state that the following year, it will be observed that the Parliament received reports and did nothing. And that the same things that were reported last year or this year will be reported next year. So I think the Central Committee of Parliament, given the importance of some of the topics that have been addressed here, and where no action has come, no policies have been drafted, that careful attention is paid to that, and that the Parliament, through the Central Committee, picks up on these issues and decide how to go forward. I think it will behoove the Central Committee of Parliament to, where necessary, bring in the relevant ministers. We're now nearly at the end of 2023, and it would be good to note if, since the compilation of this report, if any improvements have been made with respect to the matters that have been highlighted, especially those that the Ombudsman and the staff of the Ombudsman office has signaled as being very, very important issue. This matter of especially procedures and policies where bidding, etc., are concerned is a matter that I think the Parliament, we have spoken about it over and over again. Especially every budget meeting, it comes back. We have been told it's going to be, it's happening. It was at the Council of Advice, then it came back, then it will be part of the TWO, and on and on and on and on. And so, Mr. Chairman, I think in this particular case that this committee should pick up its responsibility. The Ombudsman is there to report, which they have done, and Parliament needs to, from that report, distill which areas that is now our responsibility to give furtherance to. So with that, I just want to thank the Ombudsman and her staff again for the presentation, and I look forward to some type of a conclusion from this meeting that would seek to address the matters that have been clearly put in the lap of Parliament. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP Sarah Westcott-Williams. A valid point, what you just mentioned. I think we should conduct a meeting on this same issues and look into finding the problems and solutions too, wherever we can. And before I proceed to give the floor to MP Angelique, I believe the answers for the questions from the unions has been received by members of Parliament. MP Angelique Rumeau, you have the floor.
Pleasant good afternoon to you, Mr. Chairman. Pleasant good afternoon to the Ombudsman here present today with her staff, to my colleagues and to the viewing and listening public. I just have one question, but I also want to take this opportunity to thank the Ombudsman for a very detailed year report. And my question pertains to Mr. Duggins just talked about the children's ombudsman. And I would like to know if you can give a more in-depth explanation concerning that and why you see that it is indeed a necessity. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP Angelique Rumeau. The next person I see is MP George Pantaflet. MP George, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the Ombudsman, of course, and our staff for the presentation. So, Chairman, there's an article that I read, I think it's today's newspaper, entitled, "Government Barely Learns from Major Scandals, National Ombudsman Reports." And I just quote the first paragraph. The government hardly learns from the experiences gained from major recovery operations, such as those for the benefits scandal and the earthquake damage in Groningen, and continually reinvents the wheel. National Ombudsman Reinier van Zutphen concluded this in a new Ombudsman report that was published on Tuesday. Mr. Chairman, why do I say this? Again, it is clear to see, and I'm not saying this to defend anybody or whatever, to see that the Ombudsman, even in the Netherlands, is facing the same problems as the Ombudsman in St. Martin. Reports are made, advice are given, but they are not adhered to. And I believe in the presentation, it was said that the Ombudsman is preparing legislation, and correct me if I'm wrong, to add cohesive means to the investigations. Did I hear correct? I think that's important because, Mr. Chairman, organizations such as these should not be seen as toothless tigers. Otherwise, why do we have them there? Mr. Chairman, a few questions I have. One of them might have been asked before. But Mr. Chairman, my question through you to the Ombudsman is, does the complaints that are brought to the Ombudsman's office, are they just in regards to government institution, or do persons have the opportunity to bring also private institutions? I think that was asked some time ago. I can't remember what the response was, but in other words, instead of a government institution, can person launch complaints with regards to private institutions, Mr. Chairman? I say this because even with the issue of the Justice Ministry has one thing, you have also the Ministry of Labor, but then, Mr. Chairman, these persons when they have, for instance, personal issues with the employer with regards to the issue of probably dismissal and so on, can they go to the Ombudsman, or only these institutions such as the Labor Office can suffice? Also, Mr. Chairman, so do you have any complaints being launched by persons as it relates to the treatment by healthcare providers, such as ZV, government institutions, and so on? Has there any complaints been launched from persons regarding these institutions? And the matter of the persons who are allowed, I think that it was called, I think it was a protocol, I think it was called, not a protocol, there was a name that the Minister of Justice called it, which allowed persons to remain on the island in order to, while their documents are being processed. Was it called protocol, or it was called something else? Can't recall the name right now. Pilot, yes, but I think it was another name she called it. But anyhow, what I'm getting at is, indeed, it has begun, it is ongoing. I understood it's going to end of the year. I'm not sure. I thought October, I thought it already finished, but I heard until end of the year. So I'm not sure. So I need to know for sure whether it's October or the end of the year, because that's what I heard, and I was of the opinion that it ended October. It's going to end at the end of October. So that should be made clear to persons who are still hoping to use this process in order to remain on the island while the documents are being processed. And I was very happy, Mr. Chairman, when I heard about that, because for years I've been saying all the time, it is unfair for a person to be employed with a particular employer 4 and 5 years or more. The employer never files for them, but these persons are deported and the employer does not receive a fine. Mr. Chairman, I want to thank the Ombudsman again and her staff for the presentation, and I await the answers to the few questions I posed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP George. The next person is MP Rayon Peterson. MP Peterson, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon to the Ombudsman and to our support staff, to yourself, to my colleagues, and everybody else tuned in. Mr. Chairman, I've just had one question that was a little bit concerning the budget. And also a note, the role of the Ombudsman is to receive complaints from the public when it regards the governing body, so governing entities with public authority. So I think that that's the scope of what her work is. I think that's the whole idea of the Ombudsman, for the public against government. So just a note on that one. And I saw that the Kinder Ombudsman was going to be part of the proposed law. I think that's very good, to let's get, an entity to actually fight for the children's rights as well. But that also would come with some financial implications, you know, and I saw that when it comes to the personal expenses, that pertains to what, maybe 70% of the budget. Is there an indication of what amount of an increase would be needed to facilitate all of these extra things that are going to be proposed in the launch for ordering, which all, to my opinion, are actually necessary, for us to have, you know, a sort of an idea as to what we would have to say when it comes to the budget that should be presented soon to Parliament. And that will be all from me, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Peterson. The next person is MP Grisha Halliger Martin. MP
Thank you,
Grisha,
Mr.
you have
Chairman.
the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, through you, I'd like to ask the Ombudsman on one question, because as most of the questions were posed by my colleagues, it was mainly regarding just to get a clearer understanding on how the structure of the workers, the civil servants, is set up. Is it that the structure is there and it's not being enforced? Is it that they don't have performance appraisals? Is it that they get job descriptions but no one is making each other accountable? What exactly is the issue, and if possible, maybe pinpoint the type of, if possible, complaints that came in, so I could understand if maybe structurally we need to pay attention on setting up a better structure, getting another company outside to maybe create a better. I'm at loss at some of my management. Is it that there's that the structure needs to be more clear, or is it that we're lacking in enforcement and that it is there? So what is actually needed? With maybe the suggestion, maybe the Ombudsman through you, Mr. Chairman, could suggest to us maybe what is literally needed there to have the functions of each civil servant act efficiently or work efficiently. That's my question in a nutshell. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP Grisha Halliger Martin. The next person is MP Solange Duncan. MP Duncan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon to you. Good afternoon to the Ombudsman and her team. Good afternoon to my colleagues here in Parliament and all those tuning in. I also too would like to thank the Ombudsman and her staff for this report. The Ombudsman, we know, has done extensive work, especially over the last 2 years. It was very interesting to me to hear about the notary's joint decision in relation to deeds. Why? Because we all have a part to play when it comes to tackling the issues that we see come out of government in particular. The Ombudsman and her office have been doing the work they had to do. In Parliament, we've seen attempts to correct what some of us believed as wrongdoing. And for the notaries to also take some accountability in this, I was happy to hear. And so I would like to ask through you, Mr. Chair, to the Ombudsman for a little bit more information and detail on the notary's decision where it concerns the deeds and how this would impact the issuance of land moving forward. So just a little bit more information on that. But for me, it reminds us of the importance of a shared responsibility. We all have a role to play in ensuring that decisions are made ethically and that there are policies created moving forward for the people of this country. I know that there were just a few cases of civil servant matters coming out of government. So civil servants who went to the Ombudsman, but I would also just like some clarity on those matters. I believe that they were about HR in particular. So were there complaints from civil servants against P&O in particular? And if we could get just a little bit more information about that. We do hear an increase of persons leaving government. Yeah, it just isn't as nice as it was 15 years ago. That is just the honest truth. And so just a little bit more clarity on what is happening with civil servants, if the Ombudsman is aware of that. I know that there was a survey a few years ago, so I'm not sure if there would be another survey for civil servants in regards to perhaps working conditions or how civil servants feel right now, you know, working in the public sector. And that is it for me, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Solange Duncan. The next person is MP George Pantoflet. MP George, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to add one more thing, I'm just kind of copying off the report from the Ombudsman of the Netherlands. One of the things he mentioned that also hindered matters was the matter of bureaucracy. So through, Mr. Chairman, to the Ombudsman, do you think that that can be one of the reasons why government does not get back to the Ombudsman or get these problems solved? Is it possible it has to do with the issue of bureaucracy? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP George Pantoflet. I don't see any other MPs for any questions. I have one particular question is on your report of page 12, says complaint statuses. You have civil cases which are registered as 30, other cases 27. The line goes on with the different numbers that you have put up there. All the numbers, do they compile to become like just one particular case, or individually there are separate cases in there? Like the heading of the case, is it just a dispute of one particular type or different types? Like you have many other complaints, but are they all same grouped as one, or you have different problems, issues in them? So if you can elaborate, or if you have a chart of that, if you can present that. And thank you to all the members of parliament. I will look to my right, is how much time would you need to respond? Ms. Mossel, you have the floor.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, we will attempt to answer all the questions within 30 minutes.
So I'll adjourn the meeting for 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Meeting adjourned for 30 minutes. We come back at 3:35. Good afternoon and welcome back. I give the floor to the Ombudsman of St. Martin, Ms. Gwendolyn Mossel, to answer the questions posed by the members of Parliament. Ms. Mossel, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will start with the first question, which is the question from MP Rumu. Her question was to provide an elucidation into the role of the Kinder Ombudsman, the Children's Ombudsman, and the necessity thereof. The task of the Children's Ombudsman is advising the government and Parliament on legislation and policies affecting the rights of the youth, informing and educating about the rights of the youth, handling of complaints, not only relating to government organizations, but also other organizations with a task in the area of youth. Based on the International Convention of the Rights of a Child, this is the reason actually why we have to implement a children's ombudsman. And based on that convention, we were actually approached by the Ministry of Youth, Education, Youth and Sport, asking us if we could handle complaints filed regarding children. And actually, we are the only one within the ombudsman within the kingdom that do not yet have a children's ombudsman in our legislation. The second question was from MP Pantaflet. Can complaints be lodged against private institutions at the Bureau Ombudsman? No, that's not possible. But we do help everyone who comes and direct them the right way. We have a booklet with lawyers, notaries, bailiffs, of course, you know, money's involved there. And we are championing a Juridis Loket, a free Juridis Loket, you know, where everyone can go and get the necessary help that they need. It don't have to be too in-depth, but at least that they can proceed to wherever they need to go. Or maybe even sometimes simply telling them, hey, you can go into appeal. You know, you can object is already something important for people who don't understand. Next question from MP Pantaflet. Have complaints been lodged against the treatment of healthcare institutions? We do get complaints regarding medical aid and SFV, of course, that's our competence. And yes, we do get complaints. Some of them lead to reports, some of them by way of intervention, we try to help them if it's urgently. Yes, we do get those complaints. And the next question was, can bureaucracy be a reason for the non-response of government institutions? Definitely. It definitely plays a big role. I know you made a comparison with the National Ombudsman. However, I must state that when it comes to the National Ombudsman, it is more regarding the response to the recommendations that were issued, the follow-up on going into the actions that they need to do more than saying that they don't answer the people. We have a big problem, as the legal advisor mentioned, that our #1 standard of violation is promptness, meaning that we don't get responses at all sometimes, or, you know, hardly. The lack of responses, that is the main issues, not only to the public, but also to us. So, you know, we get stuck there, and whether it's bureaucracy or what the reason is behind it, I don't know, but definitely bureaucracy plays a role. And we would like to see an improvement in that. I also would like to thank you for your support for our change of legislation, having coercive means. Thank you. next question was from MP Peterson. An indication of can we give an indication of the increase that would be needed to facilitate the children's ombudsman? Of course, we can't really give an amount right now, but we definitely will need an increase in the budget. We will make an analysis, and we will then be able to say what the amount will be. But we will definitely need an increase. Also, if we increase our staff, that will also mean a bigger budget. A question from MP Heiliger. What are the issues and/or complaints lodged against civil servants? And I will tie it into the question from MP Duncan as well. She also asked for clarity regarding complaints lodged against P&O from civil servants. I will give the floor to the legal advisor, who will give a little more regarding the issues.
So the issues that civil servants encounter are multi-layered. And in terms of our process, the complaints are lodged at the department, the level of the department. So not directly against P&O. P&O is a supportive department, so they advise the ministry, and as such, the complaints are lodged directly with the particular department or ministry. That's our process. So the issues are multi-layered. That a new structure is needed is not to be excluded. This would require more in-depth investigation, because we do see issues in terms of the HR cycle as well. So the question is, that requires more investigation. However, what we do see is a lack of awareness of the rights and responsibilities by civil servants and also their superiors. Another important issue is the interpretation of these policies, of whether they interpret them incorrectly, of course, in the opinion of the Ombudsman, or that the application of the policy comes out in a disproportionate way for the particular civil servant. Of course, policies are made to be applied in generally, but in applying such in a specific case can come out disproportionately for a particular civil servant, and that is one that we see happens more often than not. In terms of when it reaches to the Ombudsman, we see that, and we ask and implore government to have attention for the specific cases as such. We see a breakdown of the relationship between managers and civil servants. And by the time it reaches to the Ombudsman, it's of a severe nature. Civil servants often feel unheard and their issues unaddressed. Ministers and or SGs we see often a lack of ability to address non-legal issues, right? Because it concerns people management, and nobody really wants to talk about feelings and or the way things were expressed. And so behind the issues of the complaint, you see people that feel unheard. And this is why one of the recommendations of the Ombudsman is leadership training and as such. The Ombudsman also recognizes unionism as an important tool that should facilitate the concerns between government and civil servants. The Ombudsman actually in 2020 issued a very extensive report on that, and it showed that buy-in and engagement from more civil servants will help. Of course, being part of the union, but also that government can play a better supportive role to facilitate CCSU. For example, in some of the other islands, they have a budget, and in terms of information and such. So those are the kind of things that we see in terms of the structure, what the issues of civil servants are, and we cannot stress enough the attention that they need as the persons that provide and produce for government. Thank you.
MP Duncan had another question, elucidation into the notary's decision on the issuance of deeds. In actuality, the notaries have their own law that they have to abide by, and they have a zorgplicht. And as I said, based on that and stated in the DIDAM case law, that they can't turn a blind eye to when having to deal with the transfer of any type of title to an immovable property owned by Country St. Martin, and not inquire if the policy was placed, because they can be held accountable. So yeah, that is their role, and based on that, they have to do their part. All of us have to do our part, and together you see that if every part does their share, then, you know, we can all account for good governance. And then the last question, sorry, was by the chairman, Mr. Bijlani. Is it one particular case in regards to the chart of cases, or is it a variety of cases? So it is, the topic is, for instance, civil cases, civil matters, and then we have, let's say, 30, but then they are individual. Every number represents, so there are 30 individual complaints that we had about different aspects pertaining to civil matters. That is the way you have to interpret this chart. I hope that is clear. Hope I answered all the questions. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ms. Mossel and Ms. Cecilia, for your answers. Is there any need for additional questions from any MPs here? I don't see any need. I would like to thank the Ombudsman of St. Martin, Ms. Gwendolyn Mossel, and her support staff for their presence here today and for providing the necessary information. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of this meeting. I thank you all for your participation. I see MP Sarah Westcott Williams has. MP Westcott Williams, you have the floor.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, sorry for breaking your closing remarks, and but I wanted to know: are you going to at least propose some type of a conclusion coming out of this meeting where the report is concerned, that we meet on it again, that, you know, something than just. So that's my question, Mr. Chairman, because I realized you were wrapping up the meeting, and so I just wanted to know, given what I stated earlier and your response to me, if maybe some type of a conclusion can be formulated to be part of this meeting on the report, that, you know, there's some follow-up to be had, that we can talk about what comes next on this report.
I believe, as you had indicated when you were questioning or putting your points together, right away before giving the floor to someone else, I indicated that we should meet on this matter as quick as possible and go through the report and make sure that we have some kind of equilibrium between how to balance the situations here and support the Ombudsman also and correct the government also. So based on that matter, I think we should have a meeting as soon as possible.
That's exactly, sorry, Mr. Chairman, but
Yes,
yeah, that's exactly my point, that part be formulated in your concluding remarks of the meeting. That's what I'm getting at.
okay. So as mentioned, I would look into this and call up a meeting as soon as possible to discuss these topics from the report and see how we can move further. So ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of this meeting. I thank you all for your participation, and I hereby close this meeting.